Commander Sarah Chen pressed her gloved hand against the cold, metal surface of the derelict vessel, feeling the vibrations of her mining ship's engines through her suit. The massive structure floating in the asteroid field defied everything she knew about spacecraft design. Its hull gleamed with an impossible silver sheen that seemed to absorb and reflect light in ways that hurt to look at directly. "Control, this is mining vessel Prometheus. I'm getting readings that don't make sense," Sarah transmitted through her comm system. "The vessel appears to be over 15 kilometers long, but my sensors show it as having zero mass signature." Static crackled back through her earpiece. "Prometheus, Control here. Run your diagnostics again. That's impossible." Sarah had already run the diagnostics 3 times. The readings remained consistent and utterly impossible. She guided her small exploration pod closer to what appeared to be an airlock. The symbols etched into the hull around the entrance looked familiar, though she couldn't place where she might have seen them before. The airlock responded to her approach without any input from her. Smooth panels slid apart with complete silence, revealing a chamber that glowed with soft amber light. Sarah hesitated for only a moment before guiding her pod inside. The outer door sealed behind her with the same eerie silence. Atmosphere readings showed breathable air inside the vessel, more impossible data. No ship could maintain atmosphere for the centuries this vessel had clearly been drifting in space. The inner airlock door opened, and Sarah stepped into a corridor that seemed to stretch infinitely in both directions. The gravity felt exactly like Earth standard. Every surface hummed with barely contained energy, though her instruments detected no power source. Bioluminescent strips along the walls pulsed in slow, rhythmic patterns that reminded Sarah of a heartbeat. The air tasted clean and carried a faint scent of something like cinnamon and ozone. She followed the main corridor toward what her tricorder indicated was the ship's central command area. The walls were covered in the same strange symbols she had seen on the hull, but now they seemed to shift and writhe when she wasn't looking directly at them. When she focused on any particular section, the symbols remained perfectly still. The command center opened up into a vast chamber with a crystalline control console at its heart. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above, giving the impression of standing beneath an open sky. Sarah approached the console carefully, noting that it seemed to be grown rather than built. Organic curves and flowing lines suggested biological processes rather than manufacturing. As she drew near, the console came alive. Streams of data in languages she didn't recognize flowed across translucent displays. Then, without warning, everything shifted to perfect English. Navigation charts showed star systems she recognized, though they were marked with dates that suggested the information was thousands of years old. "Welcome, Inheritor," a voice spoke from everywhere and nowhere at once. The words bypassed her ears entirely and formed directly in her mind. "You have been expected." Sarah's hand moved instinctively to her sidearm, though she realized how useless it would be against whatever technology surrounded her. "Who are you? What is this place?" "I am the ship's consciousness, bound to serve the warrior bloodline of Thane Kethvar. You carry his genetic markers, though diluted by millennia of divergent evolution." The displays around Sarah shifted to show a massive humanoid figure in elaborate armor. The being stood over 3 meters tall, with broad shoulders and arms that suggested incredible physical strength. But it was the face that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. Despite the alien features and strange markings, the bone structure was unmistakably human. "That's impossible. Humans haven't left Earth until recently. We've never encountered alien life before. Your species designation is incorrect. You are not native to the world you call Earth. Your ancestors were warriors of the Kethvar lineage, seeded on that world during the Great Diaspora when the hegemony fell." More images flowed across the displays. Vast fleets of ships like this one, filled with refugees fleeing some massive catastrophe. Children being placed in stasis pods, worlds being prepared for colonization by automated systems, and through it all, the same humanoid figures that looked so much like humans that the resemblance couldn't be coincidental. The hegemony was the greatest military force this galaxy had ever known. The ship's consciousness continued. For 10,000 years, the warrior clans held back the devourers from the void between galaxies. When the barriers finally fell, the survivors scattered their offspring across thousands of worlds, hoping some would survive to carry on the bloodlines. Sarah studied the genetic data flowing across one of the screens. The markers were definitely human, but they showed modifications and enhancements that were far beyond current Earth science. Increased bone density, enhanced muscle fiber efficiency, improved neural pathways, and something the ship labeled as latent psionic capacity. You're saying humans are descendants of alien warriors? Not alien to you. You are their direct descendants. The modifications in your genetic code are awakening now that you have made contact with hegemony technology. Your species has reached the threshold where the dormant capabilities can be activated. As if to demonstrate the point, Sarah found that she could suddenly understand every symbol on the ship. Knowledge flowed into her mind, not learned but remembered. She knew how to operate systems that moments before had been completely foreign. The layout of the ship became as familiar as her own home. The activation process has begun, the consciousness explained. Your nervous system is integrating with the ship's bio-neural network. You will experience some disorientation as your brain adapts to the enhanced sensory input. Sarah felt the truth of those words as her perception expanded. She could sense every system aboard the vessel, feel the flow of energy through the organic conduits, detect the subtle vibrations of space dust impacts on the hull. It was overwhelming and exhilarating at the same time. Why now? Why is this happening to me? The Devourers have found this galaxy again. Our long-range sensors detected their scout fleets crossing the galactic barrier 6 months ago. The warrior bloodlines must be awakened and reunited, or this galaxy will suffer the same fate as our original home. The displays shifted to show deep space, and Sarah could see them. Massive, angular ships that seemed to eat light itself, moving in formations that suggested vast intelligence and terrible purpose. Even through the ship's sensors, they radiated a wrongness that made her skin crawl. How many others like me are there? Across the galaxy, approximately 2 million individuals carry sufficient genetic markers to interface with hegemony technology. On your Earth specifically, perhaps 50,000 have the concentrated bloodline necessary for full activation. Sarah realized that her entire understanding of human history and humanity's place in the universe had just been shattered. Everything she thought she knew was wrong. Humans weren't a young species taking their first tentative steps into space. They were the scattered survivors of an ancient warrior race, and they were about to face the same enemy that had destroyed their ancestors' civilization. What do I need to do? First, you must complete the integration with this vessel. The process will take several hours as your nervous system adapts to the bio-neural interface. Then you must return to Earth and begin awakening others of the bloodline. The knowledge of how to find them is now part of your inherited memory. Sarah looked around the command center that was rapidly becoming as natural to her as breathing. She could feel the ship's weapons systems, dormant but still functional after millennia. The power core hummed with energy that could level mountains. The faster-than-light drive was based on principles that human science was only beginning to theorize about. How long do we have? The Devourer advance fleets will reach the outer systems of this galaxy within 5 years. Their main force will arrive within 20. That may seem like a long time, but awakening and training the bloodlines will be a monumental task. Many will resist the truth. Others will be unable to handle the integration process. Sarah nodded, though part of her mind was still reeling from the implications. She was no longer just a mining ship commander. She was apparently the heir to an ancient warrior tradition, tasked with preparing her species for a war they didn't even know was coming. The integration process began in earnest, and Sarah felt her consciousness expanding to merge with the ship's systems. Information flowed both ways as the vessel learned about current human civilization, and she absorbed thousands of years of hegemony military knowledge. It was going to be a very long day, and an even longer journey ahead. 3 weeks after her encounter with the ancient vessel, Sarah stood in a secured conference room deep within the United Earth Defense Council headquarters. The room's occupants represented the highest levels of human government and military leadership, and none of them looked particularly convinced by what she had just told them. General Morrison, the gruff head of Earth's combined military forces, leaned back in his chair with obvious skepticism. "Commander Chen, what you're describing sounds like the plot of a science fiction novel. Ancient alien warriors, genetic modifications, parasitic space monsters. Do you have any concrete proof?" Sarah activated the holographic projector she had brought from the ship. The air above the conference table filled with three-dimensional star charts showing Devourer fleet movements, genetic analysis data, and weapon schematics that were thousands of years ahead of human technology. The detail and complexity were immediately obvious to everyone present. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, Earth's lead xenobiologist, studied the genetic data with growing excitement. "These modifications are real. I've run the analysis myself on Commander Chen's blood samples. The changes to her nervous system and muscle structure are beyond our current understanding of genetics, but they're definitely present and active." "The question," interrupted President Kumar, "is whether we can trust this information. How do we know this isn't some elaborate alien deception designed to make us lower our defenses?" Before Sarah could respond, the conference room's doors burst open. Security guards rushed in, weapons drawn, surrounding a tall man in his 50s who moved with fluid grace despite their threatening posture. Sarah recognized him immediately from the ship's genetic databases. "Dr. Marcus Webb," she said, causing everyone in the room to turn toward her in surprise. "Former Special Forces, now working as a civilian engineering consultant. You've been having strange dreams lately, haven't you? Dreams of flying between stars and fighting in battles you've never experienced?" Webb stopped struggling against the guards and stared at Sarah with a mixture of fear and recognition. "How could you possibly know that? I haven't told anyone about the dreams." "Because you're one of us. The genetic markers are activating across the bloodline now that the first ship has been awakened." Sarah gestured for the guards to lower their weapons. "The ship's consciousness can track every individual with the necessary genetic concentration. Dr. Webb was drawn here by the same instincts that led me to the derelict vessel." General Morrison stood abruptly. "Are you telling me there are thousands of people walking around with alien modifications in their DNA? That's a security nightmare waiting to happen." "Not alien," Sarah corrected firmly. "These are human modifications. We are the aliens in a sense. Our ancestors just forgot where they came from." Dr. Warren was studying the new readings from her portable scanner as she examined Webb. "His neural activity is off the charts. Commander, when you mentioned the bloodline activating, what exactly did you mean?" "Show them," Sarah said to Webb, knowing instinctively what he was capable of even though he didn't know it himself. Webb looked confused for a moment, then his eyes widened as understanding flooded through him. He reached out toward the metal conference table and placed his palm flat against its surface. The metal began to reshape itself under his touch, flowing like liquid while maintaining its structural integrity. Within minutes, he had formed a perfect replica of one of the weapons shown in the holographic display. "That's impossible," breathed Dr. Warren. "Matter manipulation on that scale would require enormous energy input. The modifications allow us to interface directly with most materials at the molecular level," Sarah explained. It's not magic, it's advanced biotechnology that our ancestors developed over thousands of years of warfare. President Kumar leaned forward, suddenly very interested. What other capabilities are we talking about? Webb picked up the metal weapon he had just created and hefted it experimentally. I know how to use this. I know its range, its power settings, how to modify it for different targets. I know things I've never learned. He looked up at the assembled leaders. I know how to fly ships that don't exist, how to repair technology we haven't invented yet, and how to fight enemies I've never seen. The genetic memories are stored in dormant sections of your nervous system, Sarah added. They activate when you're exposed to hegemony technology or when others of the bloodline undergo awakening. The process is designed to rapidly restore combat capabilities to the surviving population. General Morrison examined the improvised weapon with professional interest. What kind of combat effectiveness are we talking about? A fully awakened bloodline warrior is worth approximately 100 regular soldiers in direct combat, Sarah replied. But our real advantage is technological. The ship I found is just one of thousands hidden throughout this galaxy. Each one contains weapons and defensive systems that could protect entire star systems. Dr. Warren was frantically taking notes on her tablet. The biological improvements alone would revolutionize human medicine. Enhanced healing, disease resistance, extended lifespan, improved cognitive function. There's more, Webb added, his voice growing more confident as knowledge continued to surface in his mind. We're not just soldiers. The bloodlines carry genetic templates for scientists, engineers, strategists, and leaders. Each awakening restores capabilities that took our ancestors millennia to develop. President Kumar looked around the room at his advisors, then back at Sarah. Assuming all of this is true, how do we proceed? How do we wake up 50,000 people without causing mass panic? Carefully, Sarah answered. The ship's consciousness has identified the most stable candidates first, people with military or technical backgrounds who can handle the mental strain of awakening. We start with volunteers who already suspect something is different about themselves. Like those having the dreams? Webb asked. Exactly. The dreams are the first sign that the genetic locks are weakening. About 3,000 people worldwide are currently experiencing them. General Morrison stood and began pacing. This is moving too fast. We need time to study this, to understand the implications. What if these genetic modifications have negative side effects? What if they change people in ways we can't predict? General, Sarah said quietly, the Devourer advance scouts will reach Proxima Centauri in 18 months. We don't have time for extended study periods. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Dr. Warren was the first to speak. How certain are we about this timeline? The ship's long-range sensors are far more advanced than anything we have. They can detect Devourer signatures across hundreds of light years. The readings are definitive. Sarah activated another section of the holographic display, showing energy signatures moving through deep space. These contacts are moving faster than our fastest ships, and they're heading directly for inhabited systems. Webb studied the tactical display with eyes that suddenly held thousands of years of military experience. Their approach pattern suggests a reconnaissance in force rather than a full invasion. They're testing our defenses, looking for signs of hegemony presence. What happens if they find signs of awakened bloodlines? President Kumar asked. They'll call in their main fleets immediately rather than waiting 20 years, Sarah replied grimly. The Devourers learn to fear the warrior bloodlines. Even a few awakened individuals represent an existential threat to their expansion plans. General Morrison stopped pacing. Then we're in an impossible situation. If we don't wake up the bloodlines, we can't defend ourselves. If we do wake them up, we invite immediate attack. Not exactly, Webb said, accessing memories that weren't his own. The Devourers are predictable in their tactics. They'll establish forward bases in uninhabited systems first, then probe our defenses gradually. We have a window of opportunity to prepare. Sarah nodded. The ship contains detailed tactical information about Devourer combat doctrine. We know their weaknesses as well as their strengths. Our ancestors fought them to a standstill for thousands of years before they were overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Dr. Warren looked up from her notes. What kind of numbers are we talking about? How many ships will they bring? The ship's database contains records of the final battles, Sarah said, accessing the information through her neural link. The last hegemony worlds faced fleets numbering in the millions, individual ships that were larger than our biggest cities. The weight of that statement settled over the room like a physical presence. President Kumar rubbed his temples and looked exhausted. Even with these genetic enhancements, how could we possibly stand against those odds? Because, Webb said with growing confidence, we're not just going to stand against them. We're going to do what our ancestors couldn't. We're going to win. How can you be so certain? General Morrison demanded. Webb's smile held ancient knowledge and human determination. Because our ancestors fought them alone for thousands of years. But we're not alone anymore. This galaxy has dozens of intelligent species, billions of potential soldiers, and industrial capacity our ancestors never dreamed of. The Devourers are about to discover that humans don't just fight. We unite others in fighting. Sarah felt a surge of pride and hope as she realized what Webb was suggesting. The ship's consciousness had been focused on awakening the bloodlines, but it hadn't considered the broader implications. Humans had spent generations learning to work with others, to build alliances and share technology. The warrior heritage would provide the tools for victory, but human nature would provide the strategy. We're going to need to move fast, she said, and we're going to need to start making some very difficult decisions about who to trust with this information. 18 months later, Sarah stood on the bridge of the restored hegemony vessel as it emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Proxima Centauri system. Around her, displays showed tactical information that would have been impossible for any human to process just 2 years ago. Now, with her enhanced neural pathways fully integrated with the ship's systems, she absorbed and analyzed the data streams as naturally as breathing. Contact confirmed, reported Webb from the tactical station. 3 Devourer scouts in the outer system, exactly where the projections indicated they would be. The bridge crew of 12 represented the most successful awakening candidates from across Earth's population. Each one had not only survived the genetic activation process, but had exceeded every expectation the ship's consciousness had for their capabilities. What had surprised the ancient AI most was how quickly humans adapted to working as a unit. The interesting thing, Dr. Warren commented from her position at the science station, is that they're not just sitting there. They're actively scanning the system and transmitting data back toward the galactic rim. They know something's different, added Captain Torres, the former fighter pilot who now served as Sarah's second-in-command. Our industrial activity in this system is far too advanced for a species that supposedly just developed interstellar flight. Sarah nodded, studying the tactical display. The Devourer scouts were maintaining their position near the system's outer planets, but their scanning patterns showed they were specifically looking for signs of hegemony technology. Unfortunately for them, they were about to find exactly what they were looking for. Ship's consciousness, Sarah said aloud. Are you ready to implement the new strategy? I must admit, Inheritor, your species continues to surprise me, the ancient AI responded through the bridge speakers. In all the millennia of hegemony warfare, no one ever considered using Devourer psychology against them. That's because your ancestors were honorable warriors, Webb pointed out with a grin. They fought fair fights. We're humans. We cheat. The plan they had developed over the past year was audacious in its scope and depended entirely on human psychology working on a galactic scale. Instead of simply awakening Earth's bloodline warriors and preparing for defense, they had done something unprecedented. They had shared the genetic activation technology with every intelligent species they could contact. Confederation fleet reports ready, announced Lieutenant Foster from the communication station. 200 ships from 17 different species, all crewed by awakened bloodline descendants. The revelation that humans weren't the only species descended from hegemony refugees had been the breakthrough that changed everything. Scattered across the galaxy were dozens of intelligent races that carried the genetic markers, their own ancestors having been evacuated during the Great Diaspora. Most had forgotten their origins completely, but the activation technology worked on all of them. The Altarians are particularly impressive, Dr. Warren noted. Their natural telepathic abilities combined with the genetic enhancements make them incredibly effective at coordinating fleet actions. And the Rigelians? Sarah asked. Their engineering core has been modifying hegemony technology faster than we can test it. They've improved the weapon efficiency by 30% and figured out how to integrate our systems with their existing industrial base. Webb shook his head in amazement. 6 months ago, most of these species had never heard of each other. Now they're working together like they've been allies for centuries. That's the human influence, Captain Torres observed. Every species we've contacted has mentioned how natural it feels to work with humans. We seem to have a talent for bringing different groups together. Sarah smiled at that. It was true. Where the original hegemony had been a collection of warrior clans that mostly fought independently, the new confederation felt like a genuine alliance. Species shared technology freely, adapted their tactics to support each other, and seemed genuinely invested in collective success rather than individual glory. Contact, Webb announced suddenly. The scouts are moving. They're heading directly for us. Let them come, Sarah replied calmly. Open a channel to the Confederation fleet. It's time to show the Devourers what we've learned. The 3 Devourer scout ships accelerated toward their position with the confidence of predators that had never encountered effective resistance. Each vessel was roughly the size of a human destroyer, with the characteristic angular design that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. As they approached, Sarah could feel their scanning beams probing the hegemony vessel. They're trying to identify our ship class and weapon systems, reported Dr. Warren. Standard Devourer reconnaissance protocol. Perfect. Give them exactly what they expect to see, Sarah ordered. The ship's consciousness modified their emission signatures to match a standard hegemony heavy cruiser from the final war period. To the Devourer sensors, they would appear to be a single vessel with predictable capabilities and standard crew complement. Devourers are slowing to engagement range, Webb announced. They're following textbook assault patterns. Confederation fleet, execute formation, Charlie, Sarah commanded into her comm system. Wait for my signal. The 3 scout ships took up positions around the hegemony vessel in a classic triangular formation designed to maximize their combined firepower while minimizing the target's ability to maneuver. It was a tactic that had worked against isolated hegemony ships for thousands of years. What they couldn't detect was the 200 Confederation vessels maintaining complete sensor silence in the shadow of the system's largest gas giant. Humans had taught their allies how to mask their emissions using techniques developed for submarine warfare in Earth's oceans. The Devourers had never encountered stealth tactics applied to space combat. They're charging weapons, Torres reported. Energy readings consistent with antimatter disruptors. Let them fire first, Sarah decided. I want their full attention focused on us. The Devourer ships opened fire simultaneously, sending streams of energy that would have vaporized any conventional vessel. The hegemony ship's shields absorbed the assault easily, but Sarah made sure their defensive emissions looked strained and unstable. To enemy sensors, it would appear that they were barely surviving. Now, Sarah said quietly into her comm system. 200 ships materialized from nowhere as the Confederation fleet dropped their stealth systems and opened fire simultaneously. The Devourer scouts found themselves surrounded by a coordinated assault from species they had never encountered, using weapons they didn't recognize, coordinated by tactical doctrines they had never faced. The battle lasted exactly 37 seconds. "Excellent work, everyone," Sarah announced over the fleet communication system. "Phase 1 complete." "Ship's consciousness," Webb asked. "Are you getting the reaction we hoped for?" "Indeed," the ancient AI replied, and for the first time in Sarah's experience, it sounded amused. The automated distress beacon from the lead scout transmitted for approximately 12 seconds before the ship was destroyed, long enough to send detailed tactical data about this engagement to the Devourer main fleets. Dr. Warren was analyzing the sensor records of the battle. "They'll know we have awakened bloodlines, Confederation support, and tactical capabilities they weren't expecting. More importantly," Sarah added, "they'll know we're not hiding, we're not running, we're not waiting for them to come to us." Captain Torres understood immediately. "We're hunting them." The psychological impact of that realization would ripple through the Devourer command structure. For thousands of years, they had been the predators. They had attacked civilizations that cowered behind defenses or fled to distant stars. They had never faced a coalition that actively sought them out for combat. "Confederation fleet," Sarah announced, "set course for the projected location of their forward base. Time to show them what happens when you threaten our galaxy." As the massive fleet turned toward deep space, Sarah reflected on how much had changed. The ship's consciousness had expected to awaken scattered warrior bloodlines for a desperate defensive action. Instead, humans had turned the activation process into the foundation for a galactic alliance that was stronger than the original hegemony had ever been. "Inheritor," the ship's consciousness said privately through her neural link, "I believe I understand now why your ancestors were chosen for the Great Diaspora." "Oh?" Sarah replied silently. "The warrior clans were selected for their combat capabilities, but humans were selected for something more important. Your species has the ability to turn strangers into allies, competitors into collaborators, and desperate situations into opportunities for growth." Sarah smiled as she watched the Confederation fleet moving in perfect formation through the darkness of space. Each ship represented not just awakened genetic heritage, but the conscious choice of an entire species to stand together against an ancient threat. "The Devourers are going to learn something today," she said aloud to her bridge crew. "They've spent thousands of years fighting scattered survivors and isolated worlds. Today they discover what happens when you threaten a galaxy that's decided to fight back as one." The tactical display showed their destination ahead. Somewhere in the darkness waited a Devourer forward base, confident in its superiority and unprepared for what was coming. Behind them, across dozens of star systems, the Confederation continued to grow as more species awakened to their heritage and joined the alliance. The age of running and hiding was over. The new hegemony had come home, and they had brought friends. Webb looked up from his tactical console with a grin that would have made their warrior ancestors proud. "Contact confirmed. Multiple Devourer signatures ahead. Looks like they've built quite an operation out there." "Good," Sarah replied, feeling the anticipation of 200 ships full of awakened warriors echoing through the Confederation's neural network. "I was hoping they'd put some effort into it. It's going to be much more satisfying to tear down something they actually care about." The stars ahead held promise of the first real victory against the Devourers in millennia. Not a desperate last stand, but a coordinated assault by species who had chosen to fight together. The galaxy would never be the same,